I'm Elena. I didn't mean to become the keeper of Thanksgiving. I was 16, still wearing chipped black nail polish and burning frozen pizzas at friends' houses, when my mother slipped on the back steps and broke her wrist 2 weeks before the holiday. It wasn't dramatic, just bad luck and a clean snap that turned her dominant hand into a plastered club. Everyone stood around the kitchen that night, talking in worried circles, and I remember saying very casually, "I can cook, it's fine." I meant it the way kids mean things, temporarily, helpfully, without understanding the shelf life of favors. At the time, Thanksgiving was already a production. 23 people, give or take, all orbiting the same dining room like moths. Folding tables, borrowed chairs, the good plates no one was allowed to touch except once a year. My mother ran it like a military campaign, clipboard energy without the clipboard. I'd helped before, chopping, stirring, fetching. But that year, the whole thing slid onto my shoulders in one smooth, irreversible motion. No one asked if I was ready. They just stepped aside and watched me take over. I cooked for 3 straight days. I followed my mother's instructions like sacred text, calling her into the kitchen whenever I panicked. She'd supervise from a chair, wrist propped up like a fallen soldier, correcting my seasoning, reminding me which cousin hated onions, which uncle pretended to be gluten-free. I missed the movie marathon in the living room. I missed the late-night card games. I ate standing up over the sink because there was always one more thing to baste, stir, or rescue from burning. When dinner finally hit the table, everyone clapped. Someone said, "You're a natural." Another said, "Guess we know who's cooking next year." They laughed. I laughed too, because that's what you do when you think something is a joke. The next year, my mother's wrist was fine. No cast, no excuses. Somehow I was still in the kitchen. It wasn't even discussed. Grocery lists just appeared. Questions were directed at me instead of her. I told myself it was flattering that this was what being grown up felt like. By then I knew the rhythm. When to start the stock, how early to wake up, which burners ran hot. I also knew I wouldn't sit down until everyone else had. The guest list grew the way mold grows, quietly, in the dark. A coworker who had nowhere to go, a new girlfriend, someone's roommate, someone else's parents passing through town. 23 became 26, then 28. The tables expanded, the menu expanded. My role did not. I was still the girl in the kitchen, except now I was in college, then working, then exhausted in ways sleep didn't fix. Thanksgiving stopped being a day on the calendar and became a season of dread. I'd feel it in October, a tightening in my chest when stores put out canned pumpkin displays. I learned to cook like a professional without ever being paid or thanked properly. I made food that looked good in photos, tasted like tradition, and carried everyone else's memories. People would drift into the kitchen, glass of wine in hand, to comment. Not help, comment. "The turkey looks a little small this year. You're still doing mashed potatoes, right? Last year the gravy was thicker." I smiled automatically, the way you do when you're trying not to cry in front of relatives who only see you once a year and think they know you. By the time I was in my 30s, the head count passed 30. Over 30 people waiting for a meal I cooked alone. I'd hear laughter from the other room while my feet throbbed and my back ached, and something small and bitter would bloom in my chest. I realized, slowly and painfully, that I didn't have Thanksgiving memories. I had a resume, and every year, without anyone ever saying it out loud, the expectation renewed itself, airtight and unquestioned, like gravity. By the time it became clear this wasn't a temporary arrangement, my family had stopped seeing me as a person who cooked and started seeing me as cooking itself. I wasn't Elena at Thanksgiving. I was the turkey, the sides, the timing. I was a moving part in a system that existed entirely for everyone else's comfort. They never offered help. Not real help. No one tied on an apron and asked what needed doing. Help to them meant hovering. It meant my Aunt Carla leaning against the counter saying, "You're using butter again?" while contributing nothing but opinions. It meant my cousin Beth poking at a casserole and asking if I'd made a dairy-free version just in case. It meant people announcing allergies like last-minute plot twists. No nuts, no salt, no carbs, no red meat except sometimes. I'd nod and adjust, rewriting the menu in my head while the clock ticked louder. Requests became demands dressed up as nostalgia. You know Uncle Ray expects sweet potatoes with marshmallows. Dad really looks forward to that stuffing. It wouldn't be Thanksgiving without your rolls. They said you're like it was a compliment, like ownership. When I once suggested we simplify, cut a dish or two, maybe order a pie instead of baking 5, there was a silence so heavy it felt like I'd insulted a dead relative. My mother frowned, genuinely confused. My father said, "That's just how we've always done it," as if that settled anything at all. The worst part wasn't the work. It was the way everyone else relaxed into it. They'd settle into the couch, drinks in hand, football on, laughing while I calculated oven space and timing like a stressed air traffic controller. I could hear them through the wall, their voices rising and falling, while I stood alone with a wooden spoon and a sense of being quietly erased. When I'd finally emerge, sweaty and fried, someone would say, "You should sit down," right as something burned or needed basting, and I'd turn right back around. I tried, a few times, to talk about it. I picked my moments carefully, like someone handling explosives. I said I was tired. I said maybe we could rotate hosts or make it a potluck. The responses were immediate and defensive. My mother took it personally, as if I were rejecting her legacy. My father joked that I was trying to retire early. Someone said, "It's only once a year," which is a wild thing to say about something that takes weeks of planning and days of execution. The conversation always ended the same way. Smiles tightened, subject changed, nothing altered. Somewhere along the line, I realized they genuinely believed I enjoyed this, that my silence meant consent, that my competence meant obligation. I had trained them well, without ever meaning to. Every year I showed up, every dish I perfected, every complaint I swallowed reinforced the story that this was fine, that I was fine. And once a family gets comfortable, once tradition calcifies, it becomes almost impossible to convince anyone that the person holding it up is buckling under the weight. So I kept cooking. I kept nodding. I kept shaving pieces of myself off and serving them hot. And underneath it all, a quiet resentment grew, not loud enough to cause a scene, but sharp enough to cut every time someone asked, "What time will dinner be ready?" Like it was a service they were entitled to, not a gift they'd been taking for nearly 2 decades. The year it finally broke didn't feel special at first. It never does. It crept in disguised as routine, the same spreadsheet in my head, the same knot in my shoulders. I'd already done the mental math weeks in advance. 30 people, give or take, the usual constellation of relatives and strays. I'd taken 2 days off work, cleared my schedule, started prepping early like always. I was tired before I even chopped the first onion. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I was standing in the kitchen making a grocery list when my father wandered in, casual as gravity. He opened the fridge, frowned, and said, "Oh, by the way, I invited the Harrisons." He said it the way you say you picked up milk. I asked how many. He shrugged. 8, I think. They're driving in. 8. Just like that. No discussion, no question, no pause to see if my face had drained of color, which it had. 32 people now. 32 plates. 32 sets of expectations. I felt something in me go very still, like the moment before glass shatters. I said carefully that I couldn't do that. Not this year. Not with 3 days' notice. He laughed, genuinely amused, and said, "You always say that." That was it. That sentence landed like a verdict. I realized with a clarity that felt almost peaceful that nothing I said would ever be heard as long as I kept performing. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying 18 years of holidays where I disappeared into a kitchen and emerged only to serve. I thought about how no one had ever asked what I wanted Thanksgiving to be. I thought about how tired I was of being good, of being reliable, of being endlessly accommodating. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the decision made itself. The next day, I told them I wasn't cooking. Not some of it, not scaled down, none of it. I said it calmly, like a weather report. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My mother cried. My father got angry, accused me of being dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. Someone said I was ruining Thanksgiving. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I just repeated it. I'm not cooking. They assumed I'd cave. They always did. When Thanksgiving morning came and I didn't wake up at dawn, when the kitchen stayed quiet, panic set in. There were frantic calls, half-baked plans, store-bought pies grabbed in desperation. Dinner, such as it was, happened hours late and tasted like chaos. I wasn't there to see most of it. I left early, hands shaking, heart pounding, and went home to sit alone in silence, alternating between relief and a guilt so heavy it made me nauseous. The fallout lasted weeks. I cried more than I ever had, not because I regretted my choice, but because everything it uncovered hurt. I finally did something I should have done years earlier. I went to therapy. I told the story out loud to someone who didn't interrupt or minimize it. She listened, nodded, and gently said words I'd never applied to myself before. People-pleasing. Exploitation. Pattern. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I realized how thoroughly I'd been trained to equate my worth with usefulness, how my family had benefited from that without ever questioning it. The anger came later, quieter but steadier. It wasn't explosive. It was clarifying. And with that clarity came the understanding that saying no wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Once the shock wore off and the therapy sessions started peeling layers back, I understood something crucial. Not cooking wasn't enough. I'd proven I could refuse, but refusal inside the same four walls still left me orbiting their gravity. I needed distance. Physical, undeniable distance. Something that couldn't be negotiated or guilted back into place. The idea came quietly, which is how the best ones arrive. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling mindlessly, when my best friend Nora texted me a photo of rain hitting a cafe window in Portland. She was there for work, killing time, complaining about bad coffee and beautiful trees. I stared at the picture longer than necessary. My therapist's voice echoed in my head, calm and infuriating. You're allowed to choose yourself, even if people don't like it. So I did something wildly out of character. I booked a flight. One way, leaving the morning before Thanksgiving. I didn't announce it. I didn't ask permission. I packed a small bag like I was sneaking out of my own life. When I told my parents, it was 2 days before I left. My mother went silent. My father laughed again, the same laugh as before, and said, "You're serious?" I said yes. That was the whole conversation. The chaos I left behind was immediate and loud. Group texts exploded. Calls went unanswered. Someone asked what time I'd be back to cook. Someone else said this was cruel. Another said I was making a statement at the expense of everyone else. They scrambled, tried to patch together a meal from half-remembered recipes and grocery store shortcuts. I heard later that the turkey was dry, the timing off, that people were snippy and restless. I wasn't there. I was on a plane, watching clouds slide past, feeling something in my chest loosen for the first time in years. Portland was cold and gray and perfect. Nora met me at the airport with a grin like she'd been waiting for this version of me. We ate noodles from a place that didn't care about tradition. We walked for hours, no schedule, no pressure. On Thanksgiving Day, we slept in. We found a diner that served whatever it wanted and ordered pie just because we could. I felt light, then heavy, then light again. Healing, I learned, isn't linear. It's weather. Back home, the reactions sorted themselves out. Some relatives were furious. They spoke about me like I died. Others were confused, hurt but quiet. And then there were the few who surprised me. My cousin Daniel texted to say he was proud of me, that he'd always thought it was unfair, but never knew how to say it. My Aunt Rosa left a voicemail, her voice soft, saying she hadn't realized how much I carried. My younger brother Lucas sent a simple message, "I get it. You deserve better." I cried at that one. Hard. I came back different. Not louder, not meaner, just done pretending. The world hadn't ended. Thanksgiving had survived without me. And somewhere between the rain-soaked sidewalks of Portland and my quiet apartment back home, I understood that walking away wasn't abandonment. It was a correction, a long overdue recalibration. And whether my family liked it or not, the old version of me, the one who set herself on fire to keep everyone else warm, wasn't coming back. The year after the Portland Thanksgiving, nothing snapped back into place the way my family probably hoped it would. There was no quiet return to normal, no unspoken agreement that I'd learned my lesson and would resume my post. Instead, there was an awkward new shape to everything, like furniture moved in the dark. People hesitated, conversations stalled. For the first time, my absence had weight. Some relatives stopped coming altogether. A few claimed scheduling conflicts that felt suspiciously permanent. Others showed up guarded, unsure of what Thanksgiving even was without me at the center of it. The first invitation I received came with a caveat. We're thinking of doing something simpler this year. I almost laughed. Simpler, it turned out, was code for shared. It started small. Someone suggested a potluck. The word said like a foreign language. Dishes were assigned, mistakes were made, the green beans were undercooked. 2 people brought the same pie. No one died. The world spun on. I brought one dish and stopped there. When it was empty, I sat down. When I was tired, I rested. No one looked at me like I'd broken a rule. A few people even thanked me. Over time, the dynamic kept shifting. My mother learned to let go, though not without grief. I think she had tied too much of herself to the spectacle of the meal, to the idea that abundance equaled love. My father stopped inviting extra people without checking first. That change alone felt seismic. The uncles who missed the old spread complained less when they realized no one was stepping in to save them. They adapted or stayed home. What surprised me most was how much better the holiday became. We talked more. We lingered at the table instead of rushing to clean. I learned things about my family I'd missed while trapped behind a stove. Laughter felt lighter when it wasn't fueled by exhaustion. I wasn't the last to eat anymore. I wasn't invisible. Every now and then someone still refers to it as my Thanksgiving rebellion, half joking, half accusatory. I don't correct them. Rebellions, after all, are just boundaries people weren't prepared for. What I know is this: the tradition didn't die, it evolved. And in doing so, it stopped devouring the person who held it together. Now Thanksgiving is a shared table, imperfect and warm. I show up as myself, not as a service. I leave with energy instead of resentment. And sometimes, when I watch everyone pass dishes they made with their own hands, I feel a quiet, steady pride. Not in the food, but in the fact that I finally chose to sit down and eat with them.